Hi everyone. So part of your creative assessment is that you need to include a statement of intention. So you need to include a paragraph of 200 to 400 words where you are explaining the choices that you made in your piece of writing. So what you're doing is you're saying, this is what I wrote and this is why I wrote it. This is what I want the reader to think or feel as a result. You can see this nice little example here of what we call authorial intent, what the author intended for the reader. So if we had a passage, a white cloud drifted in front of the sun on an otherwise blue sky, that's the passage from the text. What the reader might consider is that the cloud represents a break in the author's recurring depression, which can be seen by the cloud breaking the vast blueness of the sky representing the ever-present depression. The author, a white cloud drifted in front of the sun on an otherwise blue sky. So we've got this idea here that the author is writing something in order to produce an intended effect. And your statement of intention is your chance to explain that in your piece of writing. So you might hear it referred to as a written explanation, statement of intention, or a different name. But basically, it's a short introduction to your story. The written explanation is intended to explore the reasons behind why you made particular writing decisions, the authorial intent that you're showing. Why did you write what you wrote? So there are a range of things that you can include in your written explanation. In Year 9, we're looking at you emulating Steinbeck's style. So you need to be mindful of what Steinbeck did in Of Mice and Men and why you might be trying to do the same thing. Okay, so here are some of the things that Steinbeck does that I should be seeing in your piece of writing. So you should have some long descriptive sentences that are describing the setting, the location of your piece. You should be very detailed when you are describing your character's appearance because Steinbeck is extremely detailed. He tells us what they're wearing, what their frame or their build is like, what their face looks like. You should be showing that character's emotions and feelings, not necessarily naming them. So you don't say George is angry. You say George's face went red and he scowled. So you're showing me anger as opposed to naming the emotion. Steinbeck uses repetition for effect. He uses symbolism to foreshadow future events. He uses colour to paint vivid images in the reader's mind. He uses sound, sometimes a lack of sound, to place the reader in the middle of the action. He has used objective third person. I think most of you are reverting to first person because you're trying to go into that person's mind, and I'm completely okay with that. Otherwise, you could also keep it in third person, but you're explaining what's going on in their head. That's called an omniscient third person. That just means that the narrator is all-knowing. He knows so much that he can go into the character's head. You should be focusing on one character in detail. That's all you've got time to do. That's the nature of your task. You may choose to leave the character unnamed or some characters unnamed, like Curly's wife, and you should be using similes to create imagery throughout your piece. So you might not hit all of these things, but I should be seeing quite a few happening throughout, and you explain these in your written explanation or your statement of intention. So here's what it looks like in your rubric. A good one, you're looking at 350 to 400 words. Okay, so it's substantial. In order to score very high, you need to have a detailed and considered response. You need an insightful justification of decisions related to content and meaningful text links. If you're getting very low, you have very little detail. You've got little to no justification of decisions, and you've got tenuous text links. It means that they're shaky links to Of Mice and Men. I can't really see the connection. So in order to get a high result, you need to show me that you know of Mice and Men really well, you know the characters well, you know the setting well, you know Steinbeck's style well. And you need to be able to therefore tell me why you've chosen to extend the story in this way. I chose to write my piece from the perspective of Curly's wife because she is exposed to a lot of prejudice throughout the text and she is extremely lonely. So now you've got two themes, so I can see clearly why you've done that. Curly's wife is left on her own for much of the text. She is rejected by the men on the ranch and she is treated like an object as opposed to a human being. This represents how women were treated during the Great Depression and shows how inaccessible the American dream actually was. So you can see here that even in my explanation that I'm saying now, I'm being able to justify the decision that I've made because I'm talking about why I chose her. Okay, I'm going to show you a bit this in some more detail. These sentence starters are fantastic. You may use these to structure your own. So you comment on the language. The author uses long sentences and similes. So, and I have also tried to use these, and then you would actually quote yourself. So quote your story and explain why you've used it. I've used the same sorts of themes, discussed the central theme that you based your story around. How did you show the theme? How did you create an overall sense of loneliness without mentioning the word lonely? Elements of characters and characterization. I have used and include examples of this from your story that illustrates this. So are you, like Steinbeck, characterizes Lenny in a very animalistic way. It talks about his hands like they're paws. At the beginning of the novel, he drops on all fours and he's like lapping up the water from the river like a dog. So if you're doing Crooks and you want to emphasize that he's treated like a beast, you know, he gets left out in the barn with the animals, excluded on his own, you might use terms like that to characterize him. The key scene that has inspired me is authorial intent. So the similes make the reader feel or think about, or, you know, these themes make the reader think or feel about. And didactic purpose, that's just a fancy way of saying what is the author's message. So what is Steinbeck trying to tell us in this book about the American dream, about society? And what are you, therefore, in writing your story, what are you trying to show about the American dream or society? So if you're showing how George felt after he has killed Lenny, what statement are you trying to make about the American dream? That it's hopeless, that dreams are short-lived, that dreams are only possible with companionship, and yet companionship is impossible within a world like the ranch. Plot, what's the story? What's the point of your story? What story arc are you going through? And vocab, new words that you're going to use or ways that you're emulating Steinbeck. So you need to be linking back to the themes, the issues, or the key ideas raised in the text. And here's a really great example. I'm just going to move myself out of the way. My story is built around the central theme of loneliness, as this pervades the entire text. Loneliness is present throughout my story. At the beginning, the isolated landscape reflects the idea of the men having no one to lean on but themselves. My character sits at the base of a sycamore tree as he looks into the distance. All he sees in front of him are the rocky outcrops of the Gavilan Mountains that seem to dwarf the rest of nature, the expansive fields that go on forever, and the only sounds are of wildlife nipping into the river to frolic and the snapping of twigs as the animals awaken for their evening rituals. So you can see here how the writer of this statement of intention is mentioning the theme, and then they're explaining how this theme is evident in their story. So you need to do the same thing. Using language for effect. So this is where you are actually explaining, this is what Steinbeck did, this is what I did. Can you see that they're the same? So similar to Steinbeck, I have attempted to use sound to place the reader in the action and to build upon the feeling of isolation. The snapping of twigs and the small splashes of water as tiny birds flitter and duck in and out of the water's edge. These sounds suggest that there is no one around as wild animals hide when humans are present, further linking to the idea of solitude and isolation. So can you see here how this writer is using the literary technique of sound? They're saying Steinbeck uses sound, therefore I use sound, and then they quote themselves. I used sound in this way, quote, to show this idea. They've linked it back to the themes, solitude and isolation. We also think about how we build characters. So you need to tell me about why you've chosen your particular character and how you've built them. So here I have chosen to leave the central character unnamed. This reinforces the loneliness experienced by itinerant migrant workers throughout the Great Depression, as these men were exploited and forgotten. Their living and working conditions were harsh, and lacking a name reflects this. There sat a figure slumped under the ancient sycamore tree, shoulders forward, head bowed, and his knees drawn up to his chest. Body language presents a man who is ready to give up, with head bowed and shoulders forward, suggesting a beaten pose, a man who has had enough of this life. By portraying his body as slumped, also illustrates that he has collapsed and has little to look forward to in life. This also reflects his emotional state and depression. Look how much detail is going into that. You can see how easily you're going to reach 400 words. And you can see why, anything less than 350 to 400 words isn't really doing a good job. So I'm expecting this level of detail. So explain, why have you made Curly's wife wear this dress? Or why is she walking around the ranch? Why is Crooks sitting alone on his bed, scowling perhaps? So explain why you've built up this character and what emotion you're trying to show from them. Basically, your statement of intention is the whys and the hows of your writing. Why are you choosing to write this story, and how are you going about it? It should inform the reader why you chose particular words, sentence structures, literary devices, and the effects that you're trying to achieve. Why are you including repetition? What's the intended effect? Why are you including similes? What are you trying to build up? What's the atmosphere that you're trying to create? So you always include examples of your stylistic choices. You name them and you quote them from your story. It should show links to central themes, issues, and ideas raised by the author that are also present in your story. The whole point of this task is that you are showing Steinbeck's intentions in your own piece of writing.